Okay, so I'm here with Rolf. It's really good to see you.
Hey.
It's been far too long. Do you want to tell us a little bit about sort of who you are and what you do?
Sure. Hello, I'm Rolf. I am a vicar in the Church of England. So two quick things to explain there. What is a vicar? So that's somebody who's responsible for a church, helps lead the congregation in a variety of ways and does community work. And the Church of England, well, that's most of the churches scattered across the country are of a denomination of one sort or another. They're just basically different types, have different understandings of what it is to be a Christian. But most people know that they've got a local Church of England church. So I work at St Luke's in Holbeck and covers Holbeck and Beeston Hill. And I live on Dewsbury Road. So I'm very much sort of an LS11 boy, though, of course, I don't sound like I'm from Leeds
Definitely don't.
at all. So I'm originally from Kent. And I moved to Yorkshire, West Yorkshire, specifically 20 years ago. So I will not, it would appear, lose my accent. And I spent 15 years in Bradford, went to train to be a vicar, and then came back. And technically, I'm an apprentice vicar. I'm what's called a curate. So I'm apprenticed to a wonderful man called Alistair Kay. He's like my boss. He's the actual overall vicar for St Luke's Church in Holbeck, and together, along with other colleagues and volunteers, we try and help both the church community and the wider community too.
Okay. So how long have you been in your role in South Leeds?
Okay, so I've been at St Luke's Holbeck since the summer of 2017, so I'm about 3.5 years in now.
Okay.
The way you get to be a vicar is you are ordained, which means you have to go through a really fancy service where the bishop puts his hand on your heads and basically prays for you and gives you permission, license, authority to act as a leader within the Church of England. So that's when that happened for me. Yeah.
Amazing. Okay. So 3.5 years. So you had a few years sort of getting to know the area, the people before lockdown happened.
Oh, yeah.
So we're here to talk about emotional resilience, about young
Yep.
people. So what changes have you seen in the people in the community because of lockdown and during lockdown?
A crisis like coronavirus, and if it were a crisis like a war, something where it's, that kind of more overt kind of attack, I think crises reveal what's strong about a community to begin with and what's strong about you as a person to begin with. Nobody that I know has lived through anything like this. I mean, I know a few veterans and guys who've been in the forces, been in incredibly stressful situations. And as a vicar, I get to meet a lot of people who've been through lots of personal trauma of varying types. And it's amazing the sort of the usual everyday resilience you do actually encounter out there. But this has been quite different because it's kind of eaten away at our usual rhythms as human beings. And the chief rhythm, of course, is just normal physical human contact with people. That it's been shown to be is a fundamental need. We need to be in the company of people. And whether you are at the more extrovert end of the spectrum or whether you're more of an introvert, whether you're loud and outgoing or whether you're shy, and they're different to being extrovert, introvert, there is an essential need in all of us to meet with other people, be touched by other people, see another person's eyes, smell them, feel their presence. So I think that's been one of the major changes that nobody could have been prepared for. And I think we're still learning. It's not mid-December now. And everybody I'm speaking to is exhausted. And I think that's one of the chief problems the coronavirus has brought, is a level of tiredness that seems so counterfactual, doesn't it?
Yeah.
You think, well, I'm at home, I'm doing less, surely I'm going to have more energy. And the exact opposite is true, because actually the change, and any change, is what's really draining. So I think a lot for people around transitions. So as a young person, there are ordinarily big transitions you would go through, going from primary school to secondary school, taking your GCSEs, leaving school and maybe going on to college or going into your first job. Transitions are where stress creeps in. As adults, that could be getting married, that could be the arrival of a child, that could be moving house. Moving house is one of the most stressful things you can do. In and of itself, all of these things can be really good and exciting and wonderful, but they just sap your emotions really badly. They drain you physically. So I think that's one of the big things I've seen change is everybody I know is dealing with a level of exhaustion that they just couldn't have anticipated.
Yeah.
I need to take that quickly.
Yeah, it's
I'm
no
really
problem.
sorry.
We can cut.
Hello, Rolf speaking.
Hello, Rolf. It's Robert Harrison.
Oh, hi there. Thank you. I'm all right, thank you. Robert, I'm just in a meeting at the moment. Can I call you back in about an hour? Would that be all right?
That's fine.
Would you sure? Oh, thank you so much. I'm sorry I've not called you sooner. No, it's all right.
It's fine.
Great. I'll call you soon. Take care. God bless. Bye. Funeral I'm doing. Sorry. I may get a call from the guys trying to deliver, but I'm just assuming they're going to turn up, knock on the door and Alice, not let them in. Sorry. Anyway, so young people and resilience, what was the other stuff? I think one of the challenges we all faced at the moment is still adjusting to this virtual world. My sense for young people is that lockdown will have exacerbated, made worse a lot of the stress, a lot of the pressure and tension that social media brings. Within the church, when we were told we couldn't meet together to worship, you panic a bit and you go, right, we've got to go online. Let's go online. Let's do all of our services online. And you start to go, wow, it's like the internet was created for this moment. And like all things, the internet is of itself neither a good or a bad thing. But there are always unintended consequences that you just don't see coming. And for all of the good that we see, well, I mean, we're adults and we've become so dependent on it. If you grow up and you only know this online world, and then you enter into a coronavirus crisis where you're told you're not allowed to leave your house and you're not allowed to get near people, you're starved of physical contact, it's very quick to go, well, then my only legitimate way of having relationships with people is online. But they're so unreal.
Yeah.
They're so virtual. And it's so tempting, isn't it, to airbrush the sort of experience you're having at home, to pretend when you go on Instagram or if you're doing your little TikTok videos. And I mean, and TikTok's a really fascinating case for me. So I've got two boys. I've got a 9-year-old and a 5-year-old. I'm separated. They live with their mum, and they got into TikTok a bit early in the lockdown, and because some of the videos are really cute.
Yeah.
But I think mostly because it gave people purpose. It gave them this sense of, right, I'm going to set up 15 different saucepans in my kitchen and try and do a ping pong ball off them. And we're going to spend 15 hours a day trying to pull this off. And the great thing is that what that says to me is, hey, there's an amazing ingenuity and creativity that we've seen unleashed through it. But it also, more importantly for me, gives people purpose.
Yeah.
I think idleness, apathy, a lack of energy, that is one of the guaranteed ways to kill a person, because it just starves you of creativity, it starves you of purpose. You've got to have something you're getting up to do in the morning. Now, sometimes we have to do things we don't like, and especially when you're a young person, there's an awful lot you feel like you're being forced to do that you don't like. But actually, there will come a point where you have a bit more agency, you get to decide a bit more about what you do with your life. But for all of us, adults included, I still need people to give me purpose sometimes, tell me what to do. And I'm like, great, I can just crack on and do that.
Yeah, I think as well, one of the struggles for young people was that when this all started, it was very much, oh yeah, if you're young, you can't catch it. It's just really the sort of older people that need to worry.
Yeah.
But then young people are told that they can't go out, they can't do all these things like, well, what, it doesn't affect us. And then there was a short sort of period of time where there was no answers, and then it was, oh, well, what, you can catch it, you just don't have symptoms and you can pass it on to people.
So then we start giving our young people a stack load of guilt that you are now wandering around our community like the Grim Reaper. You will kill your grandmother,
yeah,
basically.
That's exactly what happened, yeah. And what stress for them. I mean, in a way, I thought that they were better prepared for this than we were, because, you know, the young people we work with are always online on Xbox or PlayStation, and they have that online digital community anyway.
Yes.
And we've been telling them for years how they should put down the computers and get out of the house. And now we're saying, wait, stay in the house and go on your computers. And I just think it's been such a confusing time for them. And
I mean, I think there's a lot to be wary of with any online activity, but I want to distinguish there because it comes back again to purpose. So as an adult, one of the things I found myself doing, and lots of adults did this, I think, in the early part of the lockdown, is they'd start binge watching TV. So you'd go onto Netflix, you'd watch some crazy program about big cats that you've never watched before because you thought this suddenly is the most important thing in my life. And I think it's always important that we pay attention to what is triggering this and what need is this serving. I think for a lot of adults, binge watching TV is what I think is a numbing exercise. It sort of allows you to switch off your emotions. You're allowed to push out of your mind for a period the worries that you're carrying around. And it's great because the government, in effect, are kind of saying, it's all right, do this. We need you to do this. But that's a profoundly unhealthy thing to do all the time. It's like when we're pushed to our limits, the physical body will go into a coma. And it does that as a form of protection and healing. It's a small way of doing that, binge watching TV. It's a very passive activity. It just sort of washes over you. It's why most of us, truthfully, we fall asleep. Well, as we get older and wider, in my case, you start to find, you watch one episode, you watch a second one, you're just falling asleep because it's just not active. Whereas online gaming and online communities is very different. And I don't know if I understand enough about how that's probably not quite as numbing, but it does create its own set of challenges because of who are you hanging out with? So who are your network of friends that you've got online? But for all of us, adult or child alone, whether you're gaming or whether you're binge watching TV or whether you're staying in the house and being super creative and you don't have any devices, actually as humans, we are hardwired because of evolution. We need sunlight. We get poorly without sunlight. We need to be touched. Like the way that the mother-baby relationship depends on physical touch. The research that's been done into breastfeeding, for example, at that very basic level. So it's great for a season. We can cope with it for a season. It's funny, just recently I'm a big sci-fi film fan. I'm particularly like those sci-fi films where you've got a team of astronauts flying off to some far corner of the galaxy. So Interstellar I really like. Yep. One of my most favourite films is Sunshine by Danny Boyle.
I don't think I've seen
it. It ends up being a bit of a slasher flick at the very end, but the basic it feels like a paint by numbers sci-fi film, but it's not because it's Danny Boyle. It's genius. But one of the tropes, the motifs that you see in sci-fi films is essentially people go mad in space, and one of the main reasons for that is you're starved of human contact, you're cooped up, and you're not able to get out. So those films are often really good because they say, well, what would you be like if you were cooped up on a long journey? And I feel like these last 9 months have been our own window into we've got to go to the sun and reignite it somehow, like that sort of thing. Yeah. And so one of the things I'm finding myself saying more and more and more is just people have got to be kinder to themselves. Like nobody is well. Nobody's doing well at the moment from what I'm seeing. Very few people will walk away from 2020 saying, I ended up in a better place than where I started. And it's okay to be honest about that.
Yeah.
Really important we're honest about that.
I got some good advice in it when lockdown happened and it changed a lot of our plans, and it was sort of, what's going to happen with the company, what can we do, we've just lost all this work, everything, with schools closed and that being mainly what we do. And somebody said, if you can't achieve the goals that you were hoping to achieve in 2020, set new achievable goals. And it really sort of changed my attitude towards the year. So everyone's still sort of like, it's 2020 over now. And I've seen a thing of, 31st of December, 23:59.59 seconds. And then the next picture is the 1st of the 13th, 2020. So it's like we've added another month to 2020 and we're just going to keep living this nightmare. And I just think for some it's been horrendous. And I've been trying to be actively saying to people, you know, don't end the year with negativity. Let's try and whatever it is, whether it's have one less sugar in your tea, whether it's, you know, have a bit of fruit each day, whether it's don't have one less takeaway a week or whatever it is, just do something which means that you're ending the year a little bit more positively than what you would be if you don't do something. And at least then it's going to feel less like a waste of a year. And some people have took it on board, some people look at me like I'm crazy. But I think it's important for everyone to understand that it's a mindset.
It absolutely is a mindset.
Only we control how we view the things that are going on around us.
I think that one of the most damaging impacts of education at the moment, so if I were with young people at the moment, one of the things I'm often keen to say to them is, like, the current setup is primed to do three things to you. It's primed to make you very, very individualistic. Consider how they arrange the exam hall. Consider how they treat you if you were to pass a note to somebody else. Now, in our adult world, we would say that's collaboration. We would say that was teamwork. But in our education system, we penalise that. So we are making you fundamentally individualistic. Secondly, because we are measuring your performance all the time, we give you the impression that we're then going to value by your efficiency. How much good can you do? And not good, that's the wrong word, but what volume of product will you give us, whether it's hours that you work or money you bring to a company. So suddenly your worth is bound up in you individually and your individual efficiency, your contribution. And then I'd say the third problem that the whole system brings up is it just keeps you in your head all the time. PE is laughed at. The arts are defunded. It's very much about your rational thinking, and we don't say no. Actually, our vision for our communities are that we are completely embodied, that your body is as important as your mind. And actually, if you're not exercising, if you're not touching people, your mind is going to suffer, and vice versa. Secondly, you need to have good friends and you need to be able to work with people, because if you treat people like they're only individuals, you're going to end up thinking like you don't need to resolve conflicts and tell people about when you're struggling, which is what you need to do when you're in a workplace. We create this environment where it's bad to admit you've done badly at work. And that's really damaging. And I say that because I think the worry now is there's all this sort of positive talk. You know, you're the master of your own ship. You got to think about next year. Really, it's a positive mindset, and I know where that's coming from, and I think it's important that we're optimistic. But what I would be worried about is that people are setting themselves unrealistic expectations about what 2021 is going to look like. Because with the greatest respect, some people are going to have a worse 2021 than they've had a 2020.
Trying to recover.
So for me, when I'm thinking about resilience, I think perhaps it's, and this is where some of my Christian faith comes into it, in that I think as a Christian, I live in what we call the now and the not yet. There is the world as it is, and there is the world as I want it to be. There is the reality of where I'm at and the reality of how long we're going to be in this for, versus the world that I'm working to see emerge. So case in point, when we went into the lockdown right at the very beginning, the Church of England, we are headed up by bishops. So each bishop is responsible for a diocese, which is effectively like a big county. Okay. And so the Bishop of Leeds wrote to all the vicars saying, we could be in these arrangements for 2 to 5 years. He was dead straight within the first couple of weeks. And the reason was he had, and all the other bishops had spoken to all the scientific advisors down in London, because they're bishops and they get to do that. And they had said, we trust your scientific advice. We trust your modelling. And I got to tell you, when I first read that, I was like, are you kidding me? 5 years of this. Like, that's my heart. That's everything I'd expected to do in 5 years gone in a heartbeat. But actually, it was profoundly realistic because, well, look, we're in December now, and I'm thinking back to all my friends who said, oh, it'll be just a couple of weeks. Like, who are you kidding?
Yeah.
Like, this has changed things potentially now we're hearing about potential new strains, and we don't know how long it's going to take for the vaccine to roll out. So realistically, I think it will be 2 years before we're back to normal. I mean, things will emerge over next year. So for me as a Christian, then I end up going, well, that means there's so much uncertainty still about tomorrow. What can I do? Well, one of the things as a Christian Jesus says is, don't worry about tomorrow because today has enough cares of its own. And I'm like, he's bang on there.
Yeah.
Now, does that mean I don't save for a pension? Or does that mean I don't revise for my exams that are coming up? Or worry about who I might date next week or what I'm going to put on Instagram? No, those things still preoccupy us. But it's about where we allow our energy to go. Deal with what's in front of you today. That's all you can do. Don't make great plans. It sounds awful.
Yeah.
Because we often, what's the line people say? We often overestimate what we'll do in a year. We underestimate what we might do in a decade or 5 years. So I think you do need to dream. I think it's important to have dreams. But it's how, for a young person right now, I mean, when I was 16, 18 especially, when I was about to go to university, like everything's possible. I mean, I wouldn't know where to begin if I was 16 years old now. So I think one of the things I'd want to say is, A, you're not on your own. Whatever the education system tries to tell you. 2, don't measure yourself by how efficient you are and how much you get done today. Don't worry too much about tomorrow. Just deal with today. If you manage to eat 1 less Mars bar and take 5-minute extra bit of walking, if you manage to share with 1 new person in the course of the next month how you're really feeling about something, that is major progress.
Yeah.
That's just,
I think some of the biggest things that's helped me this year with my head, going through 10 years of addiction and 2 prison sentences and having all this sort of crazy stuff going on. And my job is quite hectic in a similar way to yours, where I'm constantly meeting people who tell me horrendous stories that they've been through. And you take all this stuff on, and if you substitute people telling you stories for exam pressures, so
Yep.
it's, things that young people are going through now, just being outdoors, going for a walk, talking to people, they're the things. I've started going to the gym again, so I'll obviously say exercise, but mainly just fresh air without a screen, without thinking about too much stuff at once, just being outside. And again, having somebody, and this is one thing we say when we're in schools, if you don't have one person you can go to and talk to them about anything that makes you feel uncomfortable, about something that might have happened, then you need to find one.
You do.
Because we talk a lot about pressure cookers and all this stuff gets put inside. And, one of the questions we usually ask is, how many of you have gone home from school where something's happened and you walk in, mum, dad, carer, sister, grandparent, whoever it is that's at home who's looking after you, says, "Hi, have you had a good day?" And you go, "Oh, don't tell her," blah, 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 slam the door, and you walk upstairs and they're just like, "Oh." And whatever's happened hasn't been a result of what they've done.
Yeah.
They've not done anything to make that person feel that way.
Yeah.
But all the stuff that's built up inside them, which is the pressure cooker stuff,
Yeah.
they've gone home, that question's been asked, and everything just gets sort of
Yeah.
offloaded at that point. Whereas if we start talking about the things that are happening, not only will it help us deal with the things that are happening at the time,
Yeah.
but it stops us from having those outbursts against the people that don't deserve the
Yeah,
outbursts.
it's a really common aspect of living with your family. The people who are closest to you see the real you.
Yeah.
So whether whether it's your brother, your parents, your grandparents, you are less worried at home about being truly seen. So letting the real you out. And that means that all of the normal ways you curtail your behaviours in public, you can just, and sometimes that is necessary. But as you've rightly said, that they're probably the best people to start with, who are genuinely concerned. So when they say to you, "How are you?" they probably are interested.
Yeah.
I mean, again, for me, we are, if I was asked, what are human beings made for? I'm a vicar. So my answer won't surprise you, but I think that human beings are made for connection with God and connection with other people. I think this word connection is really important, partly because this is why we see so much good in the internet, because it does connect people, does create relationships. But connection is also the reason why where shame comes in and guilt comes in, because guilt is that feeling that says, oh, I've done something wrong and you're going to be sad with me. Shame says, I'm bad and you won't like me, and therefore we're going to have a disconnection. And I think particularly if you think about what can go on in school, whether it's bullying or, for example, let's say you just are struggling in one particular subject. It's very easy to just simply move from being like, well, I'm not very good at German to, well, I'm just an idiot.
Yeah.
And when you walk home and you get in and you're carrying around all this anxiety because you want to do well, you're starting to feel like I'm probably not very good at German, but then you're beginning to think that you yourself are stupid. The reason you don't sometimes share that with a person is because you're genuinely worried that they will think, like, and it sounds ridiculous to my head, but if my 9-year-old Elijah came to me and refused to tell me that he'd done well in a maths test because he thought that I would love him less because he'd done badly in a maths exam, I'd be heartbroken.
Yeah.
But that's the sort of the tricks our minds play on us. The second element is, as well as dealing with shame and that worry of, will a person like me if I tell them that I'm struggling with this thing? And of course, I mean, I'm just talking here about exam pressure. Like if you're being bullied, then that shame ratchets up. If you're having doubts about your identity, if you are self-harming, then you're more likely to then be wrestling with this feeling of guilt and shame. And I'd want to say to every person out there, do not let that stop you telling somebody. You need to tell somebody. Because here's the second wonderful thing that I have found consistently in my life before being a vicar and during a vicar. Almost everybody has got shared experiences. They're never quite the same. And be wary of anybody who says to you, oh, I know exactly what you're feeling. But you often feel like you're the only person in the world struggling with this. I'm a vicar in a church. The number of times people will think that I will dislike them because they're not sure if God really exists. They'll be like, I don't really want to tell you this, but I'm not really sure if God's there. And I'll be like, well, that's okay, because sometimes I have that worry. And it does two things in a heartbeat. One, they go, oh my word, you haven't thrown me out of the church in a heartbeat. And secondly, you too also share this. Immediately you feel more humanized. You've got a connection. There's a story. You just breathe a bit more deeply. And it's all about connection. And that's the thing, that having that as a priority in your life over how much money you're going to make, how successful you're going to be, how many people you're going to sleep with, all of those things. I mean, they are legitimate goals for some people, but I would say if you want to be resilient, if you want to get through life, and here's something as a vicar, and I know that most of my colleagues would tell you this, the funerals that I take where I get most moved, where I get most drawn into the family is where there was this love between these people. I haven't been to one funeral yet where they've said they were, above all, they were brilliant at making money. They were above all amazing at this particular aspect of their job. The funerals where you've walked away going like, I want to be like the person who's died, is where they had a deep sense of commitment and love and connection with their family. Yeah. That's like, hands down. They're the funerals you walk away going, they're clearly an amazing. And I've never met virtually, I don't know how many funerals I've done now, but only a handful have I known the person who's died. And the ones where I've thought I really wish I had were the brilliant parents, the brilliant children, the brilliant grandparents.
Yeah. The second point you made about when you share an experience and what we do is we make things out to be a lot worse than what they are. You know, what part of a 12-step recovery, which is what got me off drugs, was step 5 is about sharing your deepest, darkest secrets with another human being.
Yep.
And the stress levels leading up to that meeting is ridiculous, because you sit and you think, oh my God, I'm going to have to tell them the time where I did this and the time where I did that. And it goes back to the pressure cooker. So the only way to not react to those things, to stop taking drugs because these things happen to you or because you did these things, is to get them out.
Yeah.
And the way we do that is by talking about them. So you build this thing up inside you thinking this is going to be horrendous. And then you sit with this person, this sponsor, this sort of more knowledgeable, 12-step person, and you say, oh, well, when I was 12, I did this, and then when I was 17, this happened, and they sit there and they go, is that it? Is that it?
Yeah,
and
yeah.
you think, I've built this up over the last 2 weeks, maybe,
Yeah.
stressing about this moment. And you've said, is that it? Because it's not that bad. I've just made it feel that bad in my head. Will Smith does a brilliant thing about fear, and he's talking about being out with his friends, and they're all drunk, and they say, should we do a skydive? So he's like, yeah, let's do a skydive. And it's the week later. And then the day before, they message him saying, don't forget about tomorrow. And he's like, oh, I thought they were joking. And then he's in bed, and he's full of fear. And he says, I was laid there in the safest place I could ever be. And I was full of fear. I was in my bed. Nothing bad is going to happen to me there. And he'd built all this stuff up. And when he actually jumped out of the plane, he said, I felt nothing but peace. And he said, God puts all the best things on the brink of fear. So once you get over that, and then you achieve this thing, it's the most peaceful.
It's the waiting what kills you. That's what they say. And that is almost universally true, I think.
Yeah.
You're waiting, and you build it up. Again, like the waiting we often do on our own as well. We often bottle it up, and we don't share the fact that we're anxious about this event that's coming up. And we've weaponized. I mean, we have as a culture. We kind of, if you said to a person, "Oh, I'm really anxious about my GCSE results," I don't know why, but as a culture, we should be like, well, that's okay. That's normal.
Yeah.
It's a big deal. You put a lot of effort into that.
Yeah.
So why wouldn't you? But we belittle these things, or we say, well, anxiety is somehow. And it's funny because I think in my life, so I'm 41. I think I've seen the pendulum swing quite profoundly on this, in that I think I was a child of the 80s, and so through the 90s, it felt like it was okay increasingly to talk about some of these issues, whether it was taking drugs, whether it was inappropriate relationships, all of those. It was more okay to talk about this stuff. But then you hit the noughties, and particularly from the mid-noughties, the advent of broadband, and so everybody's got access, and suddenly the internet is on your phone, and it's weirdly become worse to my mind when I look at it. So I think that's why I've got a lot of sympathy for young people at the moment, because I think, one, you've got this technological challenge that promises connection, sometimes completely destroys it, and secondly, the whole culture at the moment is so much less compassionate and kind about mental health problems and struggles and so forth. And I think that also, my small political point, particularly since 2010, a lot of the wraparound care we were providing in colleges, in schools, when you get budget cut, schools have to start saying, well, what are our essentials, and what stuff do we have to get rid of? And in lots of educational contexts, it's all that softer stuff that's far less easily measured.
Yeah.
And I was a chaplain at Bradford College for 5 years. 3 years fairly regularly and visibly, but then 2 years I wound down. And in those last 2 years, a new manager came who I really liked, admired, a new line manager for me. Totally different to their predecessor. And quite early on, they sat down with me and they said, Rolf, if I went and spoke to anybody in the college, they would speak very highly of you. They would say you were lovely and that you sort of carry something around with you. But I need to manage you, and I need to know exactly what it is that you do. And it was really hard, because had I known that she was going to ask me that, I would have been prepared. And I would have said, well, the thing that I carry around with me, i.e. my presence, my character, my temperament, that is what you get from having me here. You can't measure that. That you can't see that on a chart, but I'm just creating something. That's what I'm here to do. But it was so clear to me that this individual didn't understand that there are some things in life you cannot measure in a bean countery kind of way. And that's why league tables were one of the worst things we ever introduced into schools, because league tables do not measure happiness. League tables do not measure potential. League tables do not measure joy. They just measure how well you happen to do in a test on a particular day, and then map how well you then did. It's not measuring your performance at all. Actually, it just simply is a way of trying to grade schools.
Yeah, we also found that when league tables came in, they some schools, local schools too, and schools in other parts of the country have been filtering out students to make and it's that instead of giving that person the support to bring them up to a level that maybe not good for the league table, but a massive improvement for them.
Absolutely,
it's easier just to push them to one side. And
if you talk to most teachers now, at church we have a handful of teachers. I have a teacher. I mean, I can teach post 16, so I work for a couple of charities doing youth training with what we now call NEETs, not in employment, education and training. I mean, isn't that lovely? Isn't it nice that we defined a whole demographic of young people by what they're not?
Yeah.
You're not in education, employment or training. Like that is like I cannot think of something more demoralizing to a young person. These are the things we're going to measure you by. Awful.
The things that you're not
but
good at,
you'd be training them, and actually formative assessment is this thing of, as you're going along, you're helping a person know how they're doing. One of the most effective ways of training anybody is to get them to do their own assessment. So, for example, if you're a joiner in a college and you've been asked to make a door, one of the best ways to do assessment is to walk up and say, how do you think you did? Because normally, if you're good, or if you're improving, you'll be able to say, well, I struggled a bit with this joint here, and I could have used this technique here. And as a teacher, you start going, you can see what you needed to have done. So you're empowering a person rather than bundling it all up into an end of year test and saying, well, you were a bit crap, weren't you?
Yeah.
It's unforgivable what we've done to young people. And also, I mean, talking about connection, we bundle up our young people into massive institutions, huge places that you're never gonna work in as an adult. Most of us work with a dozen maybe people regularly. We might be in big organisations, but you really only hang out with that number of people. And your family's usually going to be smaller. I mean, I know we're in the West, so it's 2.4 children, maybe you have 3 or 4, but your home life's going to be fairly small. Why are we putting children in 2,000, 3,000 schools? And then we think, and then I hear politicians go on the radio and say, we've got a mental health epidemic with young people, so we need to do something about it. And I end up screaming at the radio because I'm like, you've caused the problem. You are the cause. We somehow need to. No, it's not back to basics, because I think we've made great progress in education. But some of these older techniques of knowing that how we measure what a human being is really worth, and putting that in a young person now is, so you bring it back to the whole emotional resilience. That is how you help a person be emotionally resilient. Is go, where is my worth really found? And as parents, one of the hardest parts. So my eldest, as I've said, is 9. You don't really care about being cool up until about that age. And it's really heartbreaking watching him now do, and it's natural and it's normal. But you can see he's just a bit more worried about what all the other kids think.
Yeah.
Because his sense of attachment as a young child, so a baby, your attachment is with your mother. Ordinarily, but of course, for all sorts of reasons, that may not happen. But that is the primary. So I remember when my boys were babies, I'm surplus to requirements. I really am. Until about the age of 6 to 12 months, when suddenly they're much more engaged and they find another adult, another human being that they create this attachment with. And of course, I'm dad, so I'm very different to mum. I'm hairy and bristly and scratchy, and I'm deeper, and there are all these differences about me. And even if it were a same-sex couple, you're going to just find basic differences between them, and so the attachment grows, and then suddenly you become aware that you've got siblings potentially. So, but all that time, it's very much an environment of love, normally, hopefully. But when you start finding your centre of attachment, your peers, the guys you've got at school, when you start valuing their view of you, and it's not an undiluted, unconditional form of love, when it's totally conditional, like unless you wear the right clothes, unless you say the right things and like the right bands and read the right books, or are on Instagram or TikTok or whatever it is you're on the right amount of times, suddenly your worth, your identity is bound up in some conditions. I can only be loved, I can only truly belong if X, Y, and Z. I think as a geek, and I was a geek at school, I don't know, by some measure, I was remarkably free from worrying about what other people wore. If I ever show you photos of what I look like, you'll be like, we can clearly see you didn't care what you look like. So I had alternative music tastes. And it's funny because even that now, some kids get bullied because they have alternative tastes. Yeah. I think that's such a shame. Like the music you want to like the clothes you want to like. Do not seek to find your identity in anything other than who you are innately in yourself. Because here's another piece of Christian truth for you as well, from where I'm at. I believe that we are all wonderfully made in the image of God, but that we are all broken. All of us. We all make mistakes. So from Christian language, we talk about sin. You might talk about the propensity to muck up, to make mistakes. Why do we just instinctively lie? Why do we do that? But we all do, every human. So if you ever meet anybody who's trying to pretend like they got it all together, they haven't. And if you meet somebody who pretends like they're perfect, they are not. None of us are. And that's a really healthy place to be. It levels you out. It kind of goes, right, this is the level playing field. We're all inherently filled with dignity because we're made in the image of God, but we are all inherently broken, which means that we've got to be kinder to one another on both of those counts. But I think it's really hard, and I think back to my childhood, because my sister, who is 2.5 years younger than me, cared so much more about what people thought. And she's 38 now. And I see so much sadness because she's never quite worked out who she is for herself, and has never been able to quite work out what to do when people disagree with her or dislike a choice that she's made. This sort of fierce individualism, this fierce sense of wanting to sort of curate this image of who she is. And she's not here to defend herself. She'd probably say, well, I'm none of those things. But I do think that we don't underestimate how much we can carry this stuff around with us into adulthood. It's this idea that being a child is unimportant, not true. The idea that this last year has been wasted. So a lot of people would say, 2020 has been a waste. It's not been a waste. This has been really formative for all of us. It's going to have... You go to the gym. I go to the gym slightly less regularly. One of the things you learn about muscle development is you've got to take it, you've got to stretch it, you've got to break it a little bit in order for it to repair and then be stronger again. I think one of the ways we grow resilient is to lean into some of the discomfort, to put ourselves in places where we're a bit uncomfortable. So the story about Will Smith's a really good case in point. Sure, he was going to be worried in the bed, but he could have gone, based on my fear, I won't do the sky jump, I won't do the jump. But he did do it. And the fact that he's put himself in that is going to make him stronger next time it comes around. Yeah. So one of the things I think in my life I'm really glad I did is I have, looking back, taken some risks. I wish as a teenager I'd taken more risks with relationships. I wish I'd had the courage to actually say to some of the girls that I liked, I really like you, with a bit more, more in expectation than hope, rather. And I wish, looking back, this is a classic adult thing, and I'm going to sound so old now, even at 41. I look at photos of me now as a teenager, and I'm like, jeepers, mate, you look good. Yeah. Like in your head, you think I'm the really fat kid, and I was chubby, but I look good.
Yeah.
And that's one of the things as well. It's so hard to really truly see yourself. So I think as well, trust the people who really love you the most. When your mum and dad tell you that you look beautiful, you really do look beautiful in their eyes. They're not just saying it because they've been paid to, because they haven't been paid to.
Yeah, we did a talk, and we was talking about sort of body image and confidence, and for me, one of the most attractive things about somebody is confidence.
Oh.
It doesn't matter what you look like, what your hair color is, what your weight is. If you have an element of confidence, like an air of, if you walk into a room and people look at you and go, "Wow," that's one of the most attractive things for me. And I think it takes us until we get to being an adult where we think, I've got loads of people on Facebook who have sort of been trying to improve themselves throughout lockdown in whatever way that is. Everyone's different. And a couple of them have, tried the gym. And then one girl in particular just said, "Do you know what? I'm not bothered about losing weight. I'm really happy with the way I look. I'm comfortable, and I love myself, and this is how I want to be."
Yeah.
And I was just like, that's beautiful.
It's really compelling when you see that. So I helped out 2 summers, sadly not last year because of COVID, but Ripon, a venture camp. So it's 11 to 17-year-olds. I did it 2018, 2019. And there was a lad on both years, young lad. I won't say his name, but he was very quiet, quite shy. But you could tell he was a bit of a deep thinker. Anyway, one of the things, we're all in teams and gangs, 8 different coloured teams, and we did some sportsy type stuff, we did some artsy type stuff, and then we did this day where we were doing some like little drama, and this young man, like, suddenly he did this David Attenborough impression as part of this drama sketch, and it was hilarious, brilliant, and really very, very good. And I think he's 13 years old. And those are the moments where you go, that's what makes you phenomenal.
Yeah.
Not actually how you look and the fact that you're shy, but suddenly 2 things. And I'm saying this as an adult, and I hope this doesn't come across as weird or creepy, but it's such an attractive quality when you see in any human being a sort of confidence about, I'm just good at this thing.
Yeah.
You don't wear it too heavy. Like, it's about humility too. So you don't need to go around blowing your own trumpet, but just know the thing that you're good at and find something that excites you and makes you come alive. And this is the thing that's really exciting for young people now, is I think all the old traditional models of work have blown up. The internet has democratized that. You could go anywhere in the world and do your job on your laptop. There's that wonderful, wonderful scene in Skyfall, the James Bond film, where the new character of Q comes in, Ben Whishaw, wonderful actor, and he's clearly significantly younger than Daniel Craig's version of James Bond. And there's this wonderful exchange where James Bond is like, "Who are you?" Like, he says, "I venture I can do more on my laptop sipping my Earl Grey in the morning than you can do." Blah, blah, blah. And there's this sort of sense of, that's the new world we live in, that there's loads of potential. If you want a really good talk on this, Ken Robinson, on why creativity is being killed in schools. Sadly, he died recently. He did a couple of TED Talks that are outstanding. And he makes a point to go, when his generation, and he was a man in his 60s, 70s, when in his generation, there were only a few jobs available to you. So you had to follow a prescribed route. That's all gone now. So you find as a young person something that really sets you on fire, whether that's stamp collecting, whether that's doing little TikTok videos, whether that's writing, whether that's music, whether it's studying really hard and learning all about chemistry and science. So it could be traditional, it could be not. But find something that just you lose yourself in. So we were talking before, and sometimes you find yourself getting stuck in a job that you'll do for hours on end without even thinking about it.
Yeah.
You look up, you go, "Blimey, is that the time?" When you start seeing those little tells in your life, that's the stuff you go, right, that's clearly energizing you. And for young people now, there is an opportunity to find jobs that really do that, where you go, it's a pleasure to go to work. And I would say that about me as a vicar. I didn't get ordained until I was 38. I have never been happier, because I'm doing the thing I know I was meant to do. And it's taken a lot of experience and a lot of years to get here, but all the stuff I did in my teenage years has all built up to this. So I was reading my Bible like a weirdo. But I remember guys, like when we had, what did we call it? It was supposed to be study time, wasn't it? But we always called them free time. So we'd go and sit in the library and we'd throw paper at each other and we'd read. And there was a lad who used to do these wonderful cartoons, these sketches. There's another friend of mine now who runs a racing company, forget what his team are called, and I don't know how he got into that, but he clearly just must have followed a passion. I went to a grammar school as well, so it was very rare for guys to leave at 16, but a couple did, and they did really well. They went off and got jobs in the city at 16 years old. I grew up in Kent, so a couple of them went up to Lewisham in southeast London. They did very well for themselves, and that was good for them. But it was finding something that just you get up in the morning, you go, this is what I want to do. There's a lot of stuff you've got to wade through in the meantime, I'm afraid, But I think so. Maybe that's another thing that helps you build some emotional resilience. Is also about having the long view. You won't wake up with that passion really clear. It emerges. You find it gives you life, and you won't start perfect. So I have several passions in my life, and one of them is music. I love music. I love listening to it, reading about it, talking about it, introducing people to new bands, going to gigs, and I like playing. I've only really ever been taught to play trumpet and tuba. The rest I've kind of taught myself. And I taught myself to play guitar, like just acoustic guitar. I can strum and sing. I'm all right. When I started to teach myself, I was massively overconfident though. And I remember my girlfriend at the time, I said to her, I think I'd been maybe playing for a couple of weeks. I said, I think I'm good enough to play live. And the look she gave me, this horror, like, would you mind if I wasn't there when you did that? Like, I know you're full of confidence, but I think you're going to have to give it just a bit more time. Yeah. But that's what you're looking for, is when you do something, you think, this is really good, I want to share this with people. Sorry, there we are.
Yeah, it is. And I think it is important that people have something to work towards. You know, we meet lots of young people who unfortunately don't know what they want to do with the rest of life, and that's okay.
That's okay.
Yeah, because it will come. You know, I started my company at the age of 32, so you know it was 5 years ago, and I'm living my best life now, earning probably less money than what I ever had throughout my career. But this is exactly what I want to do. This is exactly where I want to be. I get to pick and choose my projects that we do, and you know, I just love coming into work. I don't book things in too early, so I get to choose what time I get up. Yeah. I get to choose to go to the gym every morning before I even start work. So, and this is all the sort of little additional bits that come along with being self-employed. And I've got no experience of running a company. I didn't go to business school. You know, I didn't do really well in GCSEs. I think I got a C in English and the rest were worse. So there's possibilities for everybody. And whilst GCSEs are important, and you know there are a lot of exam pressures, our long-term effects of mental health are more important than GCSEs are. And it's okay that I think we're helping by saying, you know, your GCSEs is really important. You really need to study, and you know you won't get a career or you won't get a good job without them. And yes, they are important, and it's difficult to talk about this because obviously if people are going to listen to this in schools, GCSEs are important, but your mental health is more important. And if we're working with young people who are having to take illegal medication to calm them down to be able to sit in exams, now no amount of future credit to me is worth putting yourself through that at such a young age. Yeah. You know, there's the number of adults joining evening classes, you know, to top up, have shot up. So people are realising that, you know, we can do this later on in life. You know, if it's that stressful at the moment, if we're putting ourselves through all these horrendous things just to get through, you know, some exams, then you know we need to look at how we're making young people feel. So yeah, I genuinely really appreciate you coming in. Thank you very much.
Well, good. You're welcome. I just had a couple of other quick thoughts.
All right, okay.
Just based on that observation, wealth is measured in different ways. The problem with the work really hard at your exams and you'll get a job mentality is it still somehow says to you, jobs equal money, money equals happy. Yeah. Stuff equals happy. Wealth is found, the richest people I've met, and this is going to sound so cliched and so cheesy. Do it. But the richest people I've met have got wonderful connections with friends and family, just a rich network of what we would call social capital. They're the really great people. And you're also wealthy in terms of how rich you are, both in terms of your character and your identity and all the experiences that you carry around. And I would say that as well as exams, and exams are important because they are the doorways into other opportunities. It allows you to learn more about the world. And I would say just be curious. You should want to learn because you're curious about life. And the most interesting people are interested in other people and interested in what's going on around them. So always be curious. But what I would have hoped exams do is give people a bit of humility too. I can promise you this: an employer is going to be much more interested in employing somebody who's able to say, I'm sorry I made a mistake. I'm sorry I didn't meet the deadline. Admitting your faults. You are a much more attractive person to a manager than somebody who thinks you've got all the answers and you've got all the right grades. It's trust, it's humility, it's a sense of tenacity, good humour. All those things really, really do matter. And the big questions we ask ourselves at the beginning of our life and that always dog us is not how much money will I make, not will I get to live in a fancy house, not will I be significant. The big questions we ask ourselves are, who am I? Who am I? Yeah. And life is about finding out who you are, and you are different people all the way through your life. And what am I here for? Like, what am I really, really here for? What is my legacy going to be? What's going to my family? How am I going to make an impact? And I think sometimes wrestling with those questions, and particularly as you get to the end of the year and it's Christmas and you're at school, it's always good to ask yourself that too.
Yeah.
I love asking that. I love being with people and helping them ask those questions. It's good.
Yeah, it is, and it's good to see where they dig them answers from as well, because it's, general questions you can fire an answer back, but when you ask them something they really got to sit and think about, it's good to see that process happening.
Yeah, it's lovely.
So, but yeah, again, thank you very much for coming in.
My pleasure.
Really appreciate it.